sounded softly, almost imperceptible at first, a faint tapping behind me that I told myself was just the echo of my own steps, bouncing back from empty streets or deserted hallways. But as the nights wore on, the tapping grew more distinct, more precise. It began to mimic my every movement, a cruel, rhythmic echo that was never out of sync. Every time I quickened my pace, it matched me stride for stride. When I slowed, it too slowed. It became impossible to ignore, like a shadow that clung to me in the deepest darkness. One chilly evening, driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, I stopped dead in my tracks on a quiet street littered with autumn leaves and the distant hum of street lamps. I held my breath, listening intently. The tapping ceased immediately. For a moment, I thought I had broken the connection. But as soon as I took another step forward, the echo resumed, soft, deliberate, haunting me with its relentless rhythm. The presence was no longer an abstract fear. It was stalking me, closing in with every step I took. The panic that followed was suffocating. I tried running, darting down alleyways and zigzagging through the shadows in desperate attempts to lose the sound behind me, but the footsteps dogged me, never faltering. Sometimes they felt too close, like someone was breathing down my neck. Other times, just out of sight, waiting patiently. At home, I bolted every door and locked every window, yet the footsteps infiltrated even those sanctuaries. They echoed across my creaking floors at midnight, descending staircases that didn't lead anywhere, following me from room to room in a chilling game of cat and mouse I had no chance of winning. I rigged my apartment with cameras, hoping to catch whoever, or whatever, was stalking me. I scanned the recordings obsessively, but only ever captured long stretches of empty, dim hallways. The sound, however, never failed to make its presence known. It grew louder in the silence, wrapping itself like a cold fog tightening around my chest, a shadow without form but with a malevolent hunger. Even when I unplugged every device, tore out wires, and abandoned technology altogether, the footsteps persisted, walking me into exhaustion and terror. One restless night, bathed in the cold glow of a flickering street lamp filtering through my bedroom window, the mirror suddenly cracked in two shattering fractures. An unnatural chill swept the room like the breath of death. It was then I realized I was not dealing with a human stalker but something far darker. An entity, a twisted shadow bound to mimic and entrap victims in an endless loop of fear. My reflection shattered, and for a brief moment, I glimpsed not only my own terror but the cold, empty gaze of something following me relentlessly just out of sight, eternally patient. Suddenly, messages started appearing, sent anonymously on my phone, watching me through hacked cameras, littered with my exact location. I reported it, but the police were skeptical. They chalked it up to paranoia, perhaps a prank by trolls or cyberstalkers. But I knew better. The footsteps had become my curse, a heartbeat of dread that infiltrated every moment. One rainy evening, driven by a shattered resolve and a desire to confront what haunted me, I followed the echoing steps to an overgrown park shrouded in mist and fog. The yellow-hued street lamp overhead bathed everything in a sickly, eerie glow. Sitting alone on a damp bench, my heart thudding painfully in my chest, the silhouette of a figure emerged from the fog, a blurred shape, devoid of features but synchronized perfectly with my movements. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the night as the figure dissipated like smoke. It whispered one final, chilling warning: we walk until one falls. Sleep abandoned me after that, replaced by a gnawing terror that clawed at the edges of my sanity. Each day blurred with the nightmarish cadence of invisible footsteps locked in my shadow. I reached out to experts in the paranormal, drawn to the edge of hope. They spoke of shadow entities, dark, insidious spirits trapped between worlds, bound to mimic, torment, and consume the fear of those they stalk. Armed with ancient rites and talismans, I fought to break the cycle, trying to ensnare the entity and banish it back into obscurity. One night, during an intense encounter, I caught the creature in a shattered mirror fragment. It was a hollow shell, eyes dark as voids, its form flickering like a broken hologram tethered between worlds. It lunged at me, its cold touch like a deathly embrace, dragging me into darkness, but I awoke gasping, clutching the jagged mirror shard in my trembling hand, proof that the nightmare was no longer just a dream. I fled to another town, desperate for escape, but the footsteps followed. The relentless echo trailed me through unfamiliar streets, proving no distance could sever their hold. One last night, numb with exhaustion, I wandered a deserted riverside path under a sky heavy with storm clouds. The footsteps reverberated eerily close, louder and more insistent than ever before. I stopped, steeled myself, and turned to face the darkness, whispering, "I'm not afraid." The footsteps ceased, and an unnatural silence settled, the kind that presses against the eardrums and chills the soul. For a moment, an illusion of peace embraced me, but beneath that fragile calm lurked a more terrible truth: some shadows never truly leave. They wait. They watch. They bide their time to claim the next life caught in their mirrored steps.
For weeks I felt it before I saw it, the unshakable sense that I was being watched, not in the usual way of prying eyes from a window, but something closer, like breaths whispered under the floorboards. I moved into an old house, promising a fresh start, a break from cold apartments and nosy neighbors. It was supposed to be a sanctuary, but the silence beneath the creaking floorboards whispered secrets no one wanted to hear. The basement was unfinished, dark and damp, filled with spider webs and the sharp scent of mold. A single bulb hung from exposed wiring, casting long, twisted shadows on cracked concrete. At night, footsteps echoed softly down there, uneven and slow, like a hesitant visitor weighing each step. I told myself it was the house settling, old homes groan and speak in their own language. But the feeling remained, I was never alone. One evening, as I prepared to sleep, a faint scratching caught my ear. It wasn't from outside or the walls but from the floor beneath my feet. Hard hammering, I knelt to press an ear to the wooden boards. There it was again, the unmistakable scrape of nails clawing into wood. For a flicker of a second, I thought I saw movement below, a shadow slipping silently in the darkness. I told myself to call the landlord, but what would I say? That a ghost or a stranger lurked beneath my home? The thought was too insane to speak aloud. I started spending more time monitoring the basement, shining my flashlight through cracks and crevices, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever was hiding. Days passed with no sight, but the scratching persisted. Sometimes soft, sometimes frantic. It was as if the thing below was alive, trapped, or waiting. I found tiny piles of dirt and dust mounded unnaturally in corners, and one night, I discovered an old rat trap, set but untouched. Nothing else seemed to survive down there except the shadow crawling beneath the floor. I checked every lock and window, convinced someone had broken in. There was no sign of forced entry, no footprints, no evidence. But the feeling of eyes watching, tracking every movement, grew more intense. I stopped inviting friends over, stopped staying late at work, paranoia twisting its claws deep. Then came the night I heard a voice. Soft at first, barely more than a hum of breath, but growing clearer, a whisper of someone crying, calling out names I didn't recognize but somehow felt familiar. I dropped the glass I was holding, the sharp crash punctuating the oppressive silence. Fear tied my tongue, every instinct screamed to run, but something held me there, a mix of dread and desperate curiosity. I finally decided to descend the basement stairs. The air was cold and thick, heavier than the rest of the house. My flashlight flickered as it caught peeling paint, cobwebs draped like funerary veil, and then movement. A pale face, barely visible through the shadows, blinked at me from behind a rusted boiler. I gasped. The figure was a child, wiry and thin, with eyes too old for such a young face. Her clothes were threadbare rags, her lips cracked and trembling. She whispered, "I'm sorry I scared you." I reached out. She recoiled, but didn't run. The basement was her world, a hidden prison beneath my feet. She spoke of being trapped, forgotten by those above, listening, waiting. A ghost? A lost soul? Or something darker? Determined to help, I tried to get her out, but every attempt was thwarted. Doors won't shut properly now, lights flicker, and the house seems to pulse with a living heartbeat. The basement grew to feel less like a place and more like a trap, alive, breathing, hungry. One night while I slept, the whispering returned, louder, desperate. My dreams twisted into crawling darkness, nightmares of walls closing in and the child's voice crying in hopelessness. Waking in cold sweat, I found a new scrawl on a dusty wall, "Please don't forget me." The terror shifted from curiosity to desperation. I researched the house's history, uncovering stories of a missing girl who vanished decades ago, presumed dead but never found. Her name was Emily, just like the girl in the basement. A local historian warned me to leave, whispering that the house was cursed, homes haunted not by ghosts, but by sins buried beneath foundations. One stormy night, I ventured down to the basement again, flashlight trembling in my grip. The pale child stood at the bottom of the stairs, watching silently. I asked her why she stayed, why she didn't leave. She smiled, a haunting curl twisted on cracked lips, and answered, "Because I'm not trapped by this house. I'm trapped by you." A chill tore through me as realization slammed in. I wasn't the victim here. I was the prisoner. The watcher, not the watched. Every night since, I've heard the scratching beneath the floor, not from some trapped child, but from me, from the darker parts of my own mind clawing to break free. As I write this, I wonder if anyone will hear, or believe, the truth. The basement spy isn't a stranger hiding beneath your home. Sometimes, it's the monster you've become.
The first photograph was supposed to be for my socials, sunset light, perfect hair and lashes, me pouting just right next to my new place. Capturing the next chapter, I posted. My friends gushed over the look, but when I checked the raw images before editing, my heart jumped. There was someone, something, standing by the lamppost at the end of the drive. Shadows played tricks on cameras, I told myself, but the chill in my chest stayed. I'd just graduated with honors, a communications degree, a handful of local pageant titles, a face people recognized from ads and stage banners. I'd moved into this Airbnb in a historic neighborhood because my new job demanded it. Everything was tailored, color coordinated, and planned. Nothing ever happened by accident. But after that photo, it began. In every selfie, at brunch, shopping, lounging poolside, I would spot a blurred figure at the edge of the frame. Sometimes in a window's reflection, sometimes behind a parked car, always present in the raw files but never clear enough for even Facetune to filter out. I told the group chat. They joked about secret admirers and stalker exes. My mom said to get security, wink wink, meaning a dog or a bodyguard boyfriend. But I wasn't laughing. The figure, always half-shadowed, always watching, was ruining my vibe. I had my routines: Pilates at noon, oat milk lattes at 2, golden hour walks for just the right candid. The figure crept deeper into those routines, hiding in the backgrounds of grocery store snaps and peeking from reflections in downtown boutique windows. At night, after posting a new story, I'd catch myself staring at every dark shape on my phone screen and double-checking behind me in mirrors. I stopped sleeping well. Each day, new DMs arrived: nice house, great outfit. But they felt wrong, as if someone watching through the lens had written them. I started poring over my photos in detail. Always that shadow, sometimes closer, sometimes a little clearer, but never enough to call the police and not sound crazy. Late one evening, alone with a half-finished glass of wine and stale avocado toast, I heard the distinct snick of a camera shutter from the next room. My phone was on the counter, my digital camera zipped in my tote, but the sound was unmistakable. I froze, heart rabbit fast, makeup still flawless from the beauty tutorial I'd filmed earlier. It hit me then: someone was in the house, or worse, watching me through some hidden lens. I crept through, checking doors and windows, but everything was locked and untouched. The next morning, a manila envelope rested at the threshold. Inside were glossy prints, high-res photos of me in bed, me at the kitchen island, me singing along badly to Taylor Swift. All the right angles, all the wrong intent. I called the police, my perfectly manicured hands trembling as I explained to the dispatcher. They sent a pair of bored officers who found nothing but old wiring and a few holes in the garden fence, chalked it up to weird neighbors, and suggested closing my blinds. But the photos didn't stop. Neither did the shutter sounds. Even after I dumped social media, someone sent new images, me, candid and terrified, from inside my room. And always, in every shot, the figure edged closer, sometimes standing over my shoulder like a cruel shadow. I forced smiles in public, but inside I unspooled. I tried to distract myself with more beauty routines, glow-up masks, and endless cappuccino girl playlists. None of it worked. I stopped inviting people over for collabs or content shoots. I couldn't risk them, or the secret I now carried. One day, scrolling through old pics, I noticed something I'd missed. In each frame, the figure came closer, its face clearer, a pale, expressionless mask, eyes blank beneath a curtain of black hair. In the last set, it was in the room, standing right behind me. Desperate, I smashed every camera, trashed my ring lights, locked up every device with a lens. But the figure appeared in microwave reflections, on the glass of my makeup compact, or lurking in the blue light of my flat screen at night. I asked a new friend, a weird, ghost-crazy girl from work, for help. She said I was marked, that some hauntings used photos like invitations. "You let something in," she told me. "The more you post, the more it wants you." Terrified, I scoured beauty blogs and forums for supernatural tips. Salt lines, black candles, a silver hand mirror, none of it helped. One by one, the lights around my home started to flicker and pop. The air grew thick and cold, the kind of chill you feel after a bad breakup or walking into a haunted dorm party. One night, the power died for good. I lit every candle, locked myself in the bathroom, and sat with my back against the tub. That's when the camera flashed, a brilliant glare whitewashing the room. No source, no device, just pure blinding light and a single, clear voice that wasn't mine, smile. The next morning, I woke up in bed, hair disheveled, makeup smeared. Next to me was a fresh stack of photos, me, paralyzed in terror, eyes frozen wide, and the previously faceless figure now clear as crystal, mask slipping, a monstrous smile blooming as it leaned in for the shot. I stopped seeing my reflection. For days, I moved like a ghost, no texts, no photos, just silence. My friends begged me to come out, audition for new pageants, or start vlogging again. But I was done being seen. I'd learned the hard way that attention is a two-way street, and something had followed me far past the edge of the lens. Some nights, the camera flashes when I'm wide awake, and my phone auto-uploads an unfiltered shot, me, tear-streaked and frightened, always with the same thing, shadows creeping up behind me, hunched for the next pose. I thought being seen meant being safe, being adored. But now, visibility feels like a curse, like I opened the wrong filter and can't ever switch it off. People still ask for photos, autographs, DMs. But every camera I see, every lens pointed my direction, fills me with dread. Sometimes, if you look close enough at the reflections in my eyes, you can see the mask, the thing that watched, waited, and now wears my face behind every glass pane. If you find my story or my photos online, do yourself a favor, don't look. Don't follow. Don't share. Some things, once seen, never leave the frame.
The day the dollhouse came was the best day ever. It was sitting right on our front porch when I got home from school, wrapped all up in a big cardboard box with a tag that said, "For the new family." I asked Mom where it came from, but she just smiled and said it was a surprise from Aunt Edna, who I barely know. I was so curious I almost ripped the box open right there, but I waited until I got inside. When I finally did, my eyes got huge. The dollhouse looked just like our house. It had tiny blue shutters like our windows and even a little red door. I ran around showing Mom and Dad, and I named the tiny people inside, me, Mom, Dad, and Pumpkin, our cat. I put us all in the living room, sitting on tiny couches, ready for gaming night. That night, I dreamed the dollhouse was glowing, like it had a little moon inside it. I woke up and ran to look, but the tiny house was just sitting on the shelf, quiet and still except for the way it smelled, like old wood and a little bit like magic. The next morning, I was shocked to see new things inside it, like a tiny clock just like ours and even plates on the dollhouse kitchen table. I didn't remember putting those there. Maybe the dollhouse was playing a trick on me, or maybe it was alive somehow, like in my favorite fairy tales. I started spending all my time with the dollhouse, changing where the dolls sat, making tiny pictures for their walls, and putting little books on the shelves. But every time I turned my back, the dolls seemed to move by themselves. One day the doll who looked like Mom was in the kitchen, and the next day, she was in her bedroom instead. Sometimes at night, I heard tiny footsteps in there. I tried to listen really hard, and once I thought I heard giggling, but when I called for Mom, she said it was just the wind or maybe the pipes talking. I told my parents about the footprints I saw on the dollhouse carpet. They looked worried but said maybe it was just my imagination. Like ghosts, they said, but I wasn't scared anymore. I wanted to know if the dolls could see and hear me. One day, things in our real house began to disappear, like my favorite earring and even Pumpkin's collar. Mom and Dad didn't know where they went, but I found them in the dollhouse, perfectly tiny and shiny. I started wondering if the dollhouse mirrored our home but also stole from it. At night, the dollhouse glowed again. The tiny lamps were on by themselves, and the little dolls sat up, like they were alive and waiting for me to play. One doll looked at me and smiled, a real smile. It wasn't painted on like the others, and it made my heart beat fast like I was both happy and scared. I stayed up one night, watching the dollhouse, trying to see what it did when no one was looking. The tiny dolls moved like puppets, dancing on the little stairs, lighting candles, even opening and closing the red front door. I wanted to touch them, but the dollhouse felt warm, like it was breathing. Mom and Dad started whispering in the kitchen after I went to bed. I don't know what they said, but it made the house feel very quiet, like we were keeping secrets from each other. One night, I woke up to the sound of rain hitting the windows hard like tiny drums. I got out of bed and saw the dollhouse glowing, its little windows bright and shining. The dolls were standing in a circle, holding hands. I wanted to play, but the air felt thick and cold. I touched the red door, and suddenly the whole room seemed to spin. I held on tight to the tiny roof, feeling myself falling and spinning, like I was going inside a dream I couldn't wake up from. When the spinning stopped, I was inside the dollhouse. Everything was huge and towering above me. The tiny kitchen was now a real room. The little chairs were as big as thrones. I was small like a doll. I called for Mom and Dad, but I only heard laughing. Soft giggles that didn't sound friendly but strange and echoing, like they came from far away. I walked through the rooms, but the doors closed behind me, one by one. When I got to the dollhouse bedroom, the one that looked exactly like mine, I saw a doll version of me fast asleep. I wasn't sure if it was me or someone else. It didn't move or breathe, but it opened its eyes slowly, and though it looked like me, its face didn't smile back. I tried to get out, but the dollhouse kept growing, adding new rooms and halls I didn't remember. I ran through tiny kitchens and giant hallways, hearing footsteps behind me but never turning around. Somewhere deep inside, I heard a voice whisper, "Stay." I was scared but also had to know. I wanted to be loved and part of their world, but I knew this was a trap. Then the tiniest door opened, and I was back in my room, holding the dollhouse in my lap but feeling colder, heavier, like I had left a part of myself inside. Mom and Dad didn't know I was gone, even for a little while. They only asked if I was feeling okay and told me to rest more. From that day on, the dollhouse stayed on the shelf but never stopped glowing softly at night, waiting. The dolls inside weren't toys anymore, they were us, watching. And sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I see the doll's face staring back.
wind was relentless that Halloween night, ripping through skeletal trees and tugging at my coat like a warning. Street lights flickered, and the usual carnival atmosphere felt heavy, tainted. I've worked a dozen Halloweens, but this one gripped me with a weight heavier than the chilly air because the city wasn't just celebrating, it was terrified. Masks had become the collector's calling cards. Not the plastic, silly kind worn by kids or partygoers, but grotesque facsimiles intricately crafted, sewn together from human skin. A gruesome gallery that grew with every victim. Each disappearance now a headline for horror. My office felt claustrophobic amid stacks of case files littered with photographs of twisted faces frozen in fear. I stared at the newest mask, perfectly cut, stitched, and horrifyingly lifelike. The artistry was sickening and precise. Only a monster or a madman could do this. The first case came with a missing girl, Emily. Her family's grief echoed through the precinct, but all we had was the mask left behind, her terrified smile, stitched into something dead. That mask haunted me nights and days, the silent scream it held. Every crime scene was worse than the last. The killer stalked with patience and cruelty, preying on the vulnerable, turning their faces into trophies. The usual Halloween fun was now a backdrop for nightmares. Everyone was a suspect, everyone a target. Tonight, I knew, was different. I could feel it. The streets bustled with costumed families, the laughter and screams adding a cruel irony to the lurking danger. My team was out in full force, but I had this gnawing feeling we were already too late. At home, locked doors and shuttered windows offered little comfort. Alone, I studied my reflection, looking for signs of fear or weakness. All I saw was a man pushed to his limits, wearing exhaustion and dread like a second skin. A call came in just before midnight, another disappearance, the body yet to be found, but a mask left in the victim's yard. Inside the mask was a folded note, "Tonight, the mask is yours." My name wasn't written, but I knew it was meant for me. I barely slept. The city had buried its innocence under layers of fear, but I refused to let the night claim another soul, especially not mine. I drove the rain-slick roads towards an old theater rumored to be a frequent haunt of the killer. The decaying marquee creaked unevenly overhead as I slipped inside. The place smelled of dust, stale popcorn, and something metallic, blood, maybe. Hanging from the rafters and walls was a macabre collection, dozens of masks, perfect faces stitched with surgical detail, frozen mid-scream or grimace, a gallery of lost souls. My skin crawled. It was a shrine of pain and madness. A sudden noise, a floorboard creak, snapped my head toward shadowy dressing rooms. My gun was out instinctively, muscles tense for confrontation. Stepping deeper, I followed the echoing footsteps, each one heavier than the last. The theater felt alive, murmuring secrets with peeling wallpaper and shattered mirrors. By a workbench, I found surgical instruments glistening faintly in candlelight, scalpels, needles, jars of thick liquid stained red. This was his laboratory, where flesh was pried from flesh, and masks were born. The hairs on my neck stood up. I wasn't hunting anymore, I was being hunted. From the murk, a figure emerged. Towering, grotesque, its face hidden beneath a monstrous mask stitched from patches of skin pulled tight and stitched with cruel artistry. His eyes burned right through me from hollow, malevolent sockets. The mask collector. I fired once, but he moved with unnatural swiftness, whisking away into a trapdoor set beneath the stage, leading down to dark, damp cellar stairs. Swallowing my fear, I followed. The cellar was cold, smelling of rot and decay, walls slick with moisture. Light from above dimmed to a ghostly glow illuminating cages where masks hung like trophies, and worse, eyes flickered to life behind some. Some of the victims were alive, trapped in a nightmare between life and death, watching helplessly behind stitched faces. The killer attacked with feral rage, blade glinting wickedly. I dodged, fighting with every ounce of training and desperation. We wrestled in the darkness, the stench of blood mixing with stale air. I forced the blade from his grasp and bound him in chains ripped from cages. His breath rasped in a dry, hateful whisper. "The mask chooses," he hissed. "You were yours well." I looked into the mask's hollow eyes and realized the horror was far from over. He was only the collector. The true nightmare was the endless cycle of stalking and skinning. Outside, Halloween faded into dawn. The killer was in custody, but the masks remained a grim reminder that evil wears many faces. As I stared at my reflection in the shattered mirror of the cellar, I felt a shadow pressing close, waiting to claim a new face. Thoughts of sleep became impossible, because on Halloween, the mask never truly comes off.